Hey, folks. Eric Stacklebeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast, a live newscast. Great to be with everyone. We go a little more casual, as you can see on the newscast. Just have a T-shirt on. It is hot out. It's June. And man, I just got back from the blazing Middle East, which was very hot to say the least. But back in the States, we've got a lot to discuss. Let's get the chat going. Let's get the questions going. Remember, we are going to do a Q&A. We are joined by our great producer extraordinaire, Grace. She will be taking questions today as well for us. I'm happy to be with you guys. I'm happy to be back. We've already got people logging on. This is awesome. We will go. Hey, 5 p.m. Eastern time. We are going until you have been warned. But welcome to the Watchman Newscast. I just arrived back in the United States early Tuesday morning after 8 great days on the ground in Israel. Let's fix this shot a little bit. There we go. What a trip. You know, it had been a year and 5 months since I had back in Israel. I've been back in Israel, and man, I was going through withdrawal. I really was. It was late January, believe it or not, 2020. Hey, you're looking at a guy who's usually in God's land 5 times a year. In 2018, I was there 6 times in 1 year. What a blessing. What a blessing. But all of a sudden, it was cut off because of the COVID travel restrictions. So I returned home January 31st, 2020. Hey, I thought I'd be back in a few months. It wasn't to be, but finally did return last week. Incredible 8 days on the ground. And I have to say, there was such anticipation. It had been nearly a year and a half since I'd been in Israel. And I said, man, how am I going to feel when I get on the ground? Folks, I have to tell you, I felt like I came home. It was a homecoming. I got off the plane. I said, I'm home. And I think a lot of believers who have arrived in the Holy Land have that same feeling, that same instant heart connection. When I'm not in Israel, it's like a gravitational tug on my heart, pulling me back. Everything about the land, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, it all came back. It was like I hadn't skipped a beat. It was like I had just been there the day before. And not only that, all of my dear, dear friends, some of my best friends in the world live in Israel. I work with them. They're my colleagues. They're my brothers and sisters in Christ. It was like we just saw each other a day before. It was like seamless, like we did not skip a beat at all. So a very fruitful trip, to say the least. Let's see. We've already got a good amount of people joining us. A lot of comments here. Hey, God bless everyone. Everyone loves the biblical updates, are saying. So do I. I love giving them to you. Remember, and Sandra Cummings, she said, that's exactly how I feel about being in Israel. Sandra, amen. Absolutely. It's like no place in the world. If you have not been to Israel, hey, it's opening back up now. It's pretty amazing to see, and more people will be getting back for such a time as this. Time may very well be short. Let's just say that. I know we'll talk about that more today on the live chat. Let's start with the Middle East briefing. I want to get into the trip too, and what I saw, who I interviewed, what people on the ground are saying about this new Israeli government, about the new prime minister, Naftali Bennett. I was fortunate enough to actually be there on Sunday, June 13th, when this new government was sworn in. So needless to say, I got an earful from a lot of Israelis on the ground, getting their firsthand perspective about what they felt about this new government and the exit of a legendary Israeli prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's get the questions going as well. I see Bob Hill-Grube, a great friend of mine. Bob, welcome. Great to see you, my friend. Let's get the questions going. We will do a Q&A on the latter half of the newscast today, but let's keep getting people to join. If you have friends, colleagues, remind them, hey, the Watchman Newscast is live right now. But a quick Middle East briefing. Let's get up to speed. A few things to discuss. Number one, today, some breaking news. Israeli tanks on the Golan Heights struck positions of Iranian proxies, was it Hezbollah, along the Israel-Syria border. Now, if you're watching the newscast on a regular basis, you know very well that Iran is determined to establish a foothold on Israel's border. The Israel-Syria border, you have the Israeli side of the Golan Heights, then you have the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. If you've been to Israel, you know this is a mountainous region. This is the high ground. Folks, imagine prior to 1967, Israel did not possess the Golan Heights. Now, Take it back 2,500 years, 2,000 years. Absolutely. The Golan was an indispensable part of the land of Israel. But since 1948, when the nation of Israel was miraculously reestablished, Israel did not have control of the Golan. What did that mean? Well, it meant that Syria had the high ground looking down at the Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, Tiberias, Israeli cities. Whoever holds the Golan is looking down at that strategic region, which has a pretty sizable population of Israelis. And the Syrians were able to shell and fire down below at will, basically. In the 6-Day War, Israel regained the Golan. By the way, we just passed the 54-year anniversary of that miraculous, incredible victory in the 6-Day War. But when Israel took possession of the Golan once again, it was a game changer. Could you imagine that in years previous, even in the past 10, 15 years, there were some rumblings about Israel possibly giving the Golan back to Syria, not from Israelis, but from various U.S. officials who were saying, hey, maybe if Israel gives the Golan back to Syria, they can flip Bashar al-Assad into an ally of Israel. Well, we see pretty clearly now that it did not work out that way, needless to say, as Iran and Hezbollah, ISIS, and the world's worst actors all established a beachhead in Syria at Israel's doorstep. Can you imagine if Israel had given the Golan back, the disaster that would have ensued over the past decade when that Syrian civil war was raging? It's hard to believe, but remember, folks, that Syrian civil war started in March 2011. Probably 500,000 people killed, many of them women and children. But if that regime and its allies, Iran and Hezbollah, we had ISIS and al-Qaeda lurking along the Syria-Israel border as well during that civil war. What a mess. Could you imagine if they possessed not only the Syrian side of the Golan, but the Israeli side of the mountainous Golan Heights, which would have enabled them to look down at Israeli populations below, fire missiles, rockets, nightmare scenario. So I say all that to say, to give you the background, number one, and a quick reminder, President Trump, to his credit, in March 2019, acknowledged Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Big deal, folks, because as I said, there have been international voices over the years kind of pressing Israel, saying, give the Golan back. You are occupying the Golan Heights. President Trump said, no, this is sovereign Israeli territory. It was a big deal. Not as big, obviously, as moving the embassy to Jerusalem, declaring Jerusalem as the capital. And we all know it's the ancient and ancestral capital of the nation of Israel. That was what President Trump will probably be most remembered for when it comes to the Middle East, the Abraham Accords as well, of course. But acknowledging the sovereignty of Israel over the Golan, for the leader of the free world to do that, folks, was a very, very big deal. But I'm giving this background so that you understand the strategic importance of the Golan Heights. This is why Israel continues to carry out these strikes against Iran and its various proxies like Hezbollah in Syria on the Golan. The town of Quneitra is where these strikes took place yesterday. Israeli tanks, again, pounding some of these Iranian positions along the Israel-Syria border. Folks, I've stood on the Golan Heights many times, and you can look out and you can see Quneitra right in front of you. It's almost like, hey, you can walk across the border, take you about 10, 15 minutes. You're in Quneitra. I've been on the Golan when firefights have been in progress, when fire has been exchanged on the Syrian side. I've heard the explosions. I've seen the billows of smoke. I've seen the explosions. I've seen the gunfire on the Syrian side. That's how tense it is, and that's how precarious that border is on the Golan Heights. So that was a big piece of news today. Number one, because it shows you once again Israel pushing back Iranian entrenchment on the Israel-Syria border. But number two, the new Israeli Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett. This was his first major move in that Syrian theater. If you watch a newscast, you know that over the past few years, Israel has carried out hundreds, if not thousands, of airstrikes against Iranian and Hezbollah positions inside Syria. It looks like regardless of who is in power in Israel, those strikes will continue. That's up north. That's the tinderbox up north. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But I want to move down south as well and talk about some Israeli military action in Gaza yesterday. Before I do, if you're just joining us, thank you for joining us here on a live Watchman newscast. If you missed the first 10 minutes, you can check it out in our archives. Just go to newscasts on the YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe while you're there. If you have not subscribed yet, click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Folks, that's very important. Hit that notification bell. Hey, sometimes we're posting videos on the weekend depending on breaking news. I don't want you to miss anything here in the newscast. Let's check out some of our comments real quick. We have someone from the Philippines, someone from Africa joining us as well. We have people say, let's see, my first time commenting, says Catherine. Welcome, Catherine. Greetings from Germany. Great to have people from Germany here, someone in Europe as well. This is great. I mean, one of the reasons I love YouTube so much is we are truly reaching a global audience here. Folks, we're getting commenters, viewers from every continent, maybe even Antarctica, who knows? But in all seriousness, from Africa, South America, North America, Europe, Asia, from Australia, we're getting literally every continent here. To me, it's a blessing. It's overwhelming, really. I come from humble beginnings in Northeast Philadelphia, and God has given me this platform to be here with you and with my watchmen and women on the wall from around the world. Key point, for such a time as this. This is happening now for such a time as this. We've got a lot of questions here coming in. I can't wait to get to the questions. But, okay, I wanted to get to the situation down south real quick vis-a-vis this new Israeli government. They took action up north, which is obviously, hey, a good sign that it's going to be business as usual, even in a post-Netanyahu era. We'll talk about the post-Netanyahu era in a second and where Bibi goes from here. But yesterday, there was something called the Flag March in Jerusalem. Now, this is an annual march, a patriotic event. A lot of young Israelis, I've been there for prior flag marches in Jerusalem. I've seen it up close. Young Israelis they have Israeli flags, and it's exactly what the name says. It's a flag march. They march through Jerusalem. They chant patriotic songs. It was originally supposed to take place May 10th, May 11th. Then Hamas fired 7 rockets at Jerusalem and instigated a major war. So the flag march was postponed until yesterday, Wednesday, June 16th. Okay, what unfolded? Actually, it was Tuesday. I'm sorry. It was Tuesday, June 15th. I apologize. So what unfolded? Well, we had Hamas and other radical actors in the region threatening that if you hold this flag march, they'll be held to pay. Well, they held the flag march. There were some skirmishes with demonstrators, but nothing major happened except one thing. Hamas didn't fire rockets and missiles, which is always a good thing. We have this ceasefire that's been in effect since May 25th. No rockets and missiles, but they were not quiet. They attacked Israel by other means. These arson balloons, these airborne incendiary devices. Now, Hamas has been doing this for over 3 years, since the spring of 2018. Folks, it's quite diabolical. What they will do is they will take balloons, the kind of balloons you will see at a children's birthday party, a bunch of balloons. They'll also take kites. It's a beautiful summer day here on the East Coast of the United States. Perfect day to fly a kite with your kids. They will take these innocent items that are meant for joy, balloons, kites. They will turn them into incendiary devices where they'll put either an explosive device on them or some kind of flammable material. I don't know quite how they do it, but they do it, and it's got quite disastrous effect. They will sail dozens, maybe even hundreds of these balloons and kites from Gaza into southern Israel. When they land in southern Israel, they just set agricultural farmland, they set it ablaze. The main economic engine of southern Israel, folks, remember this, is agriculture and farming. It's a very agrarian society in many ways in southern Israel. These terror balloons have caused a lot of damage to the economy in southern Israel. They have scorched probably thousands of acres of land over the past three plus years. Now, Hamas did this on Tuesday. They said, well, we won't fire rockets and missiles because we know Israel will respond with overwhelming force, but we'll still hit them. We'll just use the terror balloons. And that's exactly what they did. And there were over 24 fires raging throughout southern Israel on Tuesday. Not only that, they launched more of these balloons on Wednesday. Really horrific. But Naftali Bennett, the new Israeli prime minister, did respond. I saw this as testing and probing by Hamas. Will he do something? Well, Bennett in the past has said that Israel should treat these terror balloons just as they would a rocket or a missile attack by Hamas. And sure enough, Israel responded. Tuesday night, overnight, they struck Hamas military positions inside Gaza to send a message about the balloons. I had some sarcastic commenters yesterday joking, saying, oh, balloons, big deal. Mighty Israel is disturbed by a few balloons. Let me tell you, I have interviewed farmers in southern Israel. And if you missed it, yesterday's newscast, we had one of those interviews. You can check it out here in our archives. It's horrific, the damage that has been done to the economy, to the farms. People work hard on these farms, these agricultural areas. This is their livelihood. And then these massive fires rip through. Think of the wildfires in Southern California. There you have it. A key point here, folks. Southern Israel is a dry area. It's dry. It's arid. This is the kind of area where a wildfire can spread. And Hamas surely knows that. We also had some other incidents of arson while I was in Israel last week in communities near Jerusalem, Yad Hashmonah and Mevaseret. There were some pretty large fires that authorities believe very well may have been arson. So again, it's that time of year where it's hot and dry in much of Israel. In Jerusalem, hot and dry. Southern Israel, hot and dry near Gaza. Now you get out to Tel Aviv on the coast, you get to Galilee. It is muggy, folks. It is very hot. I love it. Hey, I like the heat. I was joking with my team last week. I love the heat. I love the warm weather. But filming in it can be kind of tricky because you're trying to keep your composure on camera. You're pouring sweat. You're trying to wipe the sweat off to look decent on camera. So it can be kind of tough to film in that. But I laugh because some of the guys said, man, you're working hard. I said, hey, guys, look, I could be breaking rocks all day. I am blessed to be doing this. My dad worked in a factory every day. He was an electrician, a tool cutter. I'll never forget. He would leave the house early in the morning. He would come home every day drenched in sweat. I don't think they had air conditioning in this old school factory in which he worked. He'd come home every day exhausted and drenched and, working his tail off all day with his hands. And I said to the guys, look, it could be a lot worse. I am blessed. I'm in God's land doing exactly what he put me on this earth to do. I'm not going to complain about a little sweat or a little sunshine. So you got to keep it in perspective, right? I mean, you think, oh, gosh, it's hot. No. This is a blessing. Give it to me. I'm in Israel. I'm doing what I was born to do for such a time as this and hopefully making a difference for the kingdom of God. That's why I do what I do. And that's why you're on this newscast right now. You're not here by coincidence right now. You are part of this movement that we are building here on The Watchman. It's growing every day. We're near 350,000 subscribers, growing by leaps and bounds. God is really expanding our territory. Can't do it without everyone. Our special forces that join us on our live newscast. So just a quick aside there, but it was good to see that Bennett, the new Israeli prime minister, did retaliate. If you're just joining us, you can check out whatever you missed, first 20 minutes or so, on the newscast here in our archives. Come with some questions today. We'll get to the Q&A in the second half. We're just doing a bit of a briefing right now, a breakdown. So a good sign, right? I mean, early indicator for the Bennett government to strike Hamas and to strike Iran as defensive deterrent actions. It seems business as usual. Obviously, under Bibi for 12 years in a row, Israel took action quite frequently against these radical Iranian-backed actors, the Ring of Fire, which surrounds Israel. But what now with this government? Getting a lot of questions over the past few days about it. I was at the Israeli Knesset. We filmed there the day after Bennett was sworn in. Folks, look, here's my take. It is a very shaky coalition. Just to review, we talked about this on previous newscasts, but just to review for you, because Israeli politics can be very, very difficult to grasp, even for me, and I live and breathe this stuff, I follow it. 8 parties, imagine, 8 parties have formed a coalition, a governing coalition. Now, in America, we have Republicans, Democrats, which can be tricky enough. 8 parties together of varying ideologies. That's the thing. That's why this is a shaky coalition. You have left-wing parties, including a far-left Meretz party. You have the Yesh Atid party, which is kind of center-left, leaning left. That's Yair Lapid. And then you have some right-wing parties, and that's the coalition. And you have an Arab Islamist party that's been linked to the Muslim Brotherhood, the Ra'am party. So to say that there are diverse ideologies and potential personality and ideological clashes on the horizon in this coalition is an understatement. It's interesting, in talking to some Israeli political analysts on the ground while I was there last week and earlier this week, a lot of them said, on one hand, people were saying, hey, this thing could fall apart within 6 months. On the other hand, some said this thing may last. Why? Because although they have completely polar opposite ideologies, these 8 governing parties, all of them have one thing in common. Can you guess what it is? All of them loathe Benjamin Netanyahu and want to do anything to prevent him from coming to power once again. So, even though they may butt heads, and I'm sure they will, and have disagreements, if this thing breaks apart, Bibi might come right back in, and Bibi might end up as prime minister again. He is the mortal enemy of this so-called change coalition. Folks, it's very reminiscent of what went on here with Donald Trump in the United States. We had this never Trump movement. Anyone but Trump. We want to get him out of there by any means necessary. And in Israel, it was kind of the anyone but Bibi coalition that came to power. So as much as they may disagree on certain things, they may decide to suck it up and stay together just so they can keep Benjamin Netanyahu from power. Now, Bibi is going to lead the opposition. And I know that's a sad commentary, but Israeli politics has been described as a blood sport. So you're getting a taste of it. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just giving you how it is. This is how it works over there. This is what they're thinking. And, Bibi was in power for 15 years overall. Between 1996 and 1999 was his first stint. Then for the past 12 years, he was sworn in February 2009 through June 2021. That's a long run. And there are many forces in Israel who do not want to see him become prime minister again, and they have banded together. So that's what you have. Real quick, we're going to check some questions here. Let's see. We got some good ones coming in. Pardon me as I look down at my phone. I'm still with you. Don't worry. We're getting some good questions. Okay, this is excellent. And we will get to the questions soon. We've got thousands of people joining us here right now. Welcome to a live Watchman newscast. So that's the situation with this coalition. It could break apart any day. Or they could say, if we break apart, Netanyahu comes back, and that's our worst nightmare. And they may stay together as a result of that. That's just a fact. That's kind of a window into the thinking right now. But Bibi will be a very vocal leader of the opposition as a leader of the Likud party. Hey, folks, remember, in this latest round of elections in late March, Likud won more seats than any other party. Likud won 30 seats. The next closest competitor was the Yesh Atid party, which won only 17 seats. So Likud far and away is the most popular political party in Israel. Here you might say, okay, well, why aren't they in power right now? How's Bibi out? Here's the thing. Excuse me. You need to form a coalition. I've been trying to explain this to my wife. She says, I still don't understand. I give up. You have to form a coalition where you have 61 seats in the Israeli Knesset. That's their version of the capital or parliament. But to form a government, you need 61 seats in the Knesset. Okay, Likud has 30, but they need 61. How did they get 61? How did they get to that magic number where Bibi becomes prime minister? Well, they have to look around and survey the political landscape and say, who can we partner with to get to 61. Say another party has 10 seats, then another party has 8 seats, maybe another party has 5, and then this party has 6, and it all adds up to 61. That's what Benjamin Netanyahu tried to do. Hey, they had 4 elections in the span of 2 years. Imagine that. And he would build these shaky coalitions because he'd get to like 58 seats. And to pass that 61 seat threshold, he'd always have to bring someone into the coalition that he wasn't ideologically aligned with. And that's the problem. You've seen over the years in Israel, a right-wing party will partner with a left-wing party because that left-wing party has the necessary amount of seats to get over that 61 seat threshold. It's kind of a crazy way of doing it, but that's how it works in Israel. But Bibi could not do that this time around. He was stuck on 59 seats, just too shy of 61, whereas this so-called Change Coalition, they were able to form this coalition. Again, it took them 8 parties to get past 61 seats, but they were able to do it. Why 8 parties? Because these parties, look, Likud had 30 seats. Naftali Bennett, his Yamina party, he's the prime minister now. They only won 7 seats. That's pretty unprecedented in Israeli politics for someone whose party only won 7 seats to become the leader of the nation, to become prime minister. But that's the situation right now. Remember, this is a revolving premiership, folks. 2 years. Naftali Bennett will serve as prime minister for 2 years. After that, he passes the baton for the next 2 years to Yair Lapid of the Yesh Atid party. Now, I spoke to a few Israeli analysts this week who described Yair Lapid. He's a former TV personality, a former news anchor in Israel, pretty famous, very well known. And then he entered politics in around 2012, I believe, as did Naftali Bennett. If you want more background on Bennett, by the way, on our, let's see, was it Monday? Yes, it was. Our Monday newscast this week and the newscast yesterday, we talked, especially the Monday newscast, we talked about Bennett, where he's coming from, who he is. I interviewed Naftali Bennett in 2014, 7 years ago, but during that interview, it still holds up because he shares who he is, his ideology, where he's from, how he looks at the world. So I encourage you to check that out. It was our Monday, let's see, that was June 14th newscast. I encourage you to check that out. My interview with Naftali Bennett. I'm sure I will interview him again as well now that he's prime minister. But that gives you a window into who he is. As for Yair Lapid, and both of these guys, Bennett and Lapid, people watching here and the average person may not have really heard of these guys, right? It's all we've known. All many evangelicals have known has been Benjamin Netanyahu for 12 years in a row. So these are new names. So people are trying to scramble now and say, wait, who are these guys? Who's the new prime minister? I encourage you to check out the Monday newscast, June 14th. You can see my interview with Naftali Bennett. He is on the right. He belongs to the right-wing Yamina party. I have not met Yair Lapid yet, but here's what we do know. His Yesh Atid party, which won, again, 17 seats, the second most behind Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party in the election. Yesh Atid has been described as a centrist party. Now, in talking to political analysts in Israel this week, and they were breaking it down for me, giving me the inside scoop, they said Lapid is center-right on security. He may agree with Netanyahu more than he disagrees with him when it comes to national security. That's a good thing. But he is center-left on social and cultural issues. And that's not a good thing, at least in the U.S. That's not a good thing in terms of U.S. politics and policy. And I don't think it is in Israel either. So Bennett is pretty straight conservative to the right, historically at least. And Lapid is kind of not. He kind of varies all over the map. So if indeed this coalition lasts beyond 2 years, Lapid will be prime minister. For now, Bennett is in the hot seat. He's the prime minister for the first 2 years of this 4-year coalition deal. This coalition is supposed to last for 4 years. Will it? Really tough to say. And will Bennett be affected by the left flank in this coalition? Will they try and block him on things, folks? Remember, there's some left-wing parties in this coalition. There's an Islamist party in this coalition. So what will he be up against here? Will he have his coalition kind of nipping at his heels? 8 different parties. That's a lot of people to satisfy and a lot to cut through. He's the ultimate decision maker. He is the prime minister, but this is going to be fascinating to watch, to say the least. We'll see how it goes. And I think we are all praying that this goes well. Of course, we support Israel not because of who leads Israel. We support Israel because we support Israel. No matter who leads Israel, we have a biblical mandate to support and to bless Israel and the Jewish people, and we do just that. We wish the best for this new government, and the main reason why is, man, is this a perilous time where the world is chaotic right now. We're living in Bible times. Time is probably short, and Israel is surrounded by enemies on all sides that wish to wipe it off the map. So what Israel needs right now is a stable, strong government. Let's hope they have exactly that. If they don't, a lot of commenters are asking about Benjamin Netanyahu and what happens to Netanyahu now. If they don't, hey, let me tell you, Benjamin Netanyahu is chomping at the bit to get back into the prime minister's office. He feels like he has unfinished business, much like President Trump did. You know, President Trump had a pretty ambitious agenda planned for his second term. He did a lot of good in his first term, to say the least. And Netanyahu will go down as one of Israel's greatest prime ministers, without a doubt. So many accomplishments. And I feel like he had much more to accomplish in his view, especially concerning Iran. Because, folks, we are going to get to a point, and I'm more convinced now than ever, and that's a tease in TV. I'm going to pause right there as I look at comments here. Wow, we have great questions here. Welcome, everyone. Man, these are really good questions coming in comments. God bless all of you. Awesome. Keep them coming. We're getting to the questions in a few minutes, but that was my little teaser to keep you interested. Netanyahu feels he has unfinished business because of Iran. In talking to Israelis on the ground this week, experts, analysts, brilliant minds in Israel who are on the forefront of everything going on there, they feel it's a question not of if, but when Israel will strike Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. That day seems to be coming, and folks, it will only accelerate if the Biden administration re-enters that disastrous Iran nuclear deal. And it looks like that's going to happen. It looks like it could very well happen soon. No matter which Israeli government is in power, Israel will not allow Iran to acquire the bomb. Period. That is a red line. Now, there were rumblings back in 2012 that Israel was going to take action. Ultimately, Prime Minister Netanyahu did not take action. But if this time around, if this deal is struck once again, a disastrous reincarnation of this Iran nuclear deal, no matter who is in power, it's pretty stunning. And being in Israel, folks know this, that when you talk to Israelis of all political persuasions and ideologies in Israel, most, rather than the left-wing fringe, most agree that, hey, we cannot allow Iran to go nuclear under any circumstances. Now, here's the thing. Benjamin Netanyahu had shown himself to have backbone and be very willing to stand up to the leadership here in the United States if they disagreed with Israel, or if Israel disagreed with the U.S., disagreed with the Iran nuclear deal, Israel would say, hey, or Netanyahu would say, hey, this is how we feel. He spoke before Congress in 2015 and laid it all out there. And he publicly opposed the Iran nuclear deal. Will the current Israeli leadership, this new coalition, and the Prime Minister Bennett, if they have a serious disagreement with the U.S., will they say it? Will they say, you know what, Biden administration, this might make you very angry, but we're going to do what we need to do for Israel's security, for Israel's stability, and to protect our citizens. Obviously, a nuclear Iran is an existential threat to the nation of Israel. And the Biden administration will not like it if Israel, needless to say, strikes those nuclear facilities. And the big question, I think, and so we know the Biden administration won't like that. So will Israel still do it? Will Israel say, you know what? Sorry, America. We're sorry to make you angry, but we got to do this. Because if we don't do it, Iran, our greatest enemy, which is sworn to our destruction, will acquire the weapons to make that a reality and to wipe us off the map. Remember, Israel is the size of New Jersey, and former Iranian leaders have talked about Israel being a, quote, one-bomb country. So does Israel say to the U.S., hey, Iran is close, they're about to get the bomb? Our intelligence, Israeli intelligence, which is excellent, of course, our intelligence sources say they're about to get the bomb. America, we got to do this. Would Israel even give the Biden administration a heads up, or would they just do it? Now, I think a big question, but folks, make no mistake about it, Israel will not allow Iran to acquire the bomb. It's not going to happen. Israel will act preemptively if that appears to be inevitable. Israel will act, and it doesn't really matter, I think, who is in power. There would be an overwhelming sense among Israelis that we can't let this happen. They'll use the bomb. It's a game changer in so many ways. We've talked about this on previous newscasts, why Iran can never acquire the bomb. Think of a nuclear umbrella for Hezbollah, Hamas. Next time Hezbollah and Hamas fire some rockets, Israel looks to retaliate. Maybe Israel would be hesitant to retaliate because Iran is sitting there with the bomb and says, if you dare do it, we will wipe you off the map. Imagine that. That's complete game changer for Israel's security. It will spark a nuclear arms race in the world's most chaotic region, the Middle East. Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey will all be going to acquire nuclear weapons. And not only that, if you're an American like me, or you're in the West, you're in Europe right now, you're in South America, Latin America, wherever you are, it doesn't matter. Iran's working on intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, which do exactly what their name says. They are designed to travel across continents. They are designed to travel across oceans. Folks, you develop ICBMs for one reason and one reason only, to mount them with a nuclear warhead. So no matter what continent you are on right now and where you're watching us from, you are in range. If Iran acquires intercontinental ballistic missiles, they will mount them with a nuclear warhead. So nuclear umbrella scenario for Iran's proxies, nuclear arms race, ballistic missiles that could reach anywhere in the world. Do you think we have a problem? This is not just an Israel problem. Iran's nuclear weapons program, I can't stress that enough. And speaking here from an American perspective, I live in the U.S., the Iranian regime refers to America as the great Satan. Israel, in their ideology, their eschatology, is only the little Satan. It's America that is the great Satan and the ultimate prize in this Iranian ideology. Let's check out some questions real quick. Grace is sending me some great ones. We've got a bunch. This is awesome. Wow. We got some good stuff. We got some good stuff coming, folks. We need to get to questions. Let's do it. I didn't really tell you, you know what? That might be good. Keep you in suspense. I didn't really talk all that much about what I saw in Israel, where I went, who I interviewed. You're going to find out. You've seen some already on the newscast over the past week and a half. If you missed it, just check out the archives. We were reporting from on the ground in Israel. We were on the Temple Mount for 2 hours. What access? I mean, that's rare. We pretty much had it to ourselves for 2 hours. We were on the Israel-Lebanon border. We went into a Hezbollah terror tunnel with the Israel Defense Forces. Folks, an experience I will never forget. This is the only Hezbollah tunnel that the IDF did not destroy. It descended really into the bowels of hell, it felt like. 170 feet underground, this tunnel descended. And it took Hezbollah over 4 years to dig it and $5 million. And this wasn't just some rudimentary little hole that your kids dig in the backyard. This was a massive operation where this thing had steps, it had electrical work, it had electricity, it had a command and control center, it had an intercom where they communicated with each other. This was quite an operation. Again, it cost some $5 million. They built 6 of them that we know of along the Israel-Lebanon border. They had an elaborate system they were cutting through granite rock. Now, the Hamas terror tunnels down south, it's sandstone. It's a little softer. These Hezbollah jihadis were cutting through solid granite rock, and they would dispose of the rocks. They had a system, kind of a pulley system, where they would dispose of. It was like you were in a mine. They would dispose of the rocks, and they would They'd have pickup trucks waiting at the end of on the Lebanon end of the tunnel. They would take the rocks in the pickup and they would go and dispose of them, thinking that Israel wouldn't know. Well, Israel eventually discovered this tunnel and put a stop to it. It was about to go operational. And we're going to get into questions, but real quick, just to mention, the plan was, when it did go operational, the plan was for Hezbollah in a future conflict with Israel to pop out of these tunnels like something out of a horror movie, but not just one or two guys popping out. They were going to send dozens of their elite fighters through a tunnel in the dark of night, in the middle of the night, to go into an Israeli village or town near the Lebanon border. And their goal was to conquer the town, slaughter all of the inhabitants, and plant the Hezbollah flag, the green and yellow flag, in that town, a town like Metula in northern Israel. These were the plans. Cut off that town from the rest of Israel, blockade it, so it would take the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, some time to break through and try to save this town, save the inhabitants, but they would look to slaughter everyone inside. And I know it's heavy stuff, and I'm sorry I even have to share that, folks, but in speaking to the Israel Defense Forces when I was in this Hezbollah tunnel, they broke it down for me. They explained this was what they planned to do. This is what we stopped. And thank God that they stopped it. So Lebanon, Israel border, the Gaza border. If you watch the newscast on Friday, June 11th, you saw just a heart-wrenching story. I was inside a home that was destroyed by a Hamas rocket. It was horrific with the owner. Where else did we go? We went to Hebron, one of the great biblical cities where Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Rebekah, Sarah, and Leah, the matriarchs, the patriarchs from your Bible, are all buried. We also went to a site in Bet Shemesh where the Ark of the Covenant once stood. Man, really amazing stuff. We did a segment from the Southern Steps in Jerusalem where Jesus taught, chased out the money changers, and just some great interviews. We interviewed Yaakov Amidror, who was Benjamin Netanyahu's national security advisor. Got some great inside information from him, but you'll have to wait to see it here on the newscast and also on the Watchman TV show, which you can catch every Thursday night, tonight, as a matter of fact. The Watchman TV show, Thursday nights, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, p.m. Eastern Time on TBN, Fridays, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's get into the questions. Okay, let's see. A lot of questions, a lot of chatting, a lot of debate going on, I see. Okay, thankfully we have Grace monitoring. Let me get some questions. I'm going to look at my phone. Pardon me as I look down 1 second to get to some of these awesome questions. Okay. Let's see. Eric, how do the Israeli people feel about the new government? Great question, right? I was just in Israel. I spoke to a lot of Israelis about it. There are two schools of thought here. There is one school of thought in Israel, and what a lot of people were saying was, Rak Bibi, only Bibi. That's what I mean in Hebrew, Rak Bibi, only Bibi. You heard that a lot, only Bibi. He's the only man for the job. A lot of people feel that way, for sure. Then there's another segment of people who say, we can't stand Bibi. Anyone but Bibi. We're sick of him. He's corrupt. We want him out of there. You have that segment of people. Then you have a third tier of people who say, you know, Bibi's been great. I voted for him. I support him. But 12 years and 15 years overall, but 12 years in succession, that's a long time. Maybe we need terms here in Israel, like the U.S. has, you can't serve longer than 8 years. But they've said, 12 years is a long time. Maybe it's time for a new face, a new voice, new leadership. Maybe it's time to mix things up. Those were the three schools of thought that I heard in Israel. Only Bibi. He's the only man for the job. Anyone but Bibi. And then the third was like, well, Bibi's been great, but maybe it's time. 12 years. So that was how Israelis, everyone I talked, I didn't hear any variation from that really. It was always one of those three categories. So very interesting take there. Let's see. More questions. People at the Gaza trying to move closer inland. Let's see. Do you think the U.S. government tried to use their power to influence this election in Israel to get Netanyahu out? In this case, I do not. In the past, however, Under Barack Obama, back in 2015, I believe, it was pretty clear that the U.S. government under the Obama administration was looking to meddle in the Israeli election and push Bibi out. Obama and Bibi obviously did not get along, and Obama wanted Netanyahu out. Didn't happen. But this time around, I think the Biden administration, it's got problems of its own. He's only been in office for a few months. I don't think they had the time to focus. Remember, he was inaugurated, Biden, in late January. The Israeli election was in late March. So I think it was just too soon. Now, if there's a year from now, perhaps he would try and have some influence there. What the Obama administration tried to do, my understanding is basically send advisors to the opposition that was running. I think it was Herzog at the time. He's now the president of Israel. He was just sworn in last week. But 2015, just consultants and advisors trying to advise the opposition on ways to defeat Bibi. So that was the Obama administration, clearly did that. That's without a doubt. By the way, you might ask, what does the president do in Israel? It's a largely ceremonial role, kind of like the vice president in the U.S., but not as powerful as the vice president by any stretch. But a largely ceremonial role. The president of Israel will go to various events. He's kind of an ambassador in many ways for Israel to the world. But, in this crazy political climate in Israel, one source of power that the Israeli president does have is they are able, if there is, an unclear result, which was the case time and time again over the past few years in Israel with the elections, the president gets to choose who will form a government. So Reuven Rivlin, who was the Israeli president under Netanyahu these past few years, got a chance to do exactly that. Now Isaac Herzog is the president in Israel, so he'll be in that role now. Let's see if we got some more questions here. Let's see, guys. Do you think Netanyahu will come back if Israel goes into a large war? Someone asked. Well, he can't just come back. He's got to win an election. Now, if this coalition disbands, if it falls apart, Bibi certainly is waiting in the wings. He is still very popular. As I mentioned earlier, his Likud party won 30 seats, far outdistancing the closest competitor. So if this coalition falls apart, and that's actually a good question, in that, okay, say there is a war, a major war, and we know it's coming. We've talked many times here on the newscast about the Great Northern War, which will break out to Israel's north, pitting Israel against Hezbollah and the Iranian regime in Lebanon and Syria. So we know it's coming. There will be a major war if there's a major war under this coalition, and this coalition does not do a good job of managing that war. Then it could break apart. We could have new elections, and then Benjamin Netanyahu could very well come back. So we hope that we hope that Israel does very well. But if things get dicey and it's not a good outcome, and the people are frustrated, there's a lot of frustration, for instance, still over the 2006 Second Lebanon War that Israel fought against Hezbollah up north. Some that you talk to in Israel say we could have done a better job. Although, they set Hezbollah back at the time. Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, has been hiding in a bunker for the past 15 years since that war. So it wasn't a total failure by any stretch. But if you talk to Israelis, they say, look, we could have managed that war and conducted it better, had better strategy. And that's what I'm saying. If it seems that the strategy in the next war is not good, then perhaps the coalition disbands and there's elections again. A lot of uncertainties, but a lot of drama, to say the least. Let's see what else we have. Okay. Can we get an update on the gentleman from Ashkelon who lost his home? I'll do that in a minute. Let's see here. Colin McCann, do you believe Christ is our Savior and was here 2,000 years ago? Yes, I think that's pretty clear. But yeah, interesting. Okay. Do we have any other questions here? Okay. Ezekiel 38, yes. Okay, I'm trying to scan these questions. I apologize, guys. The man who lost his home in Ashkelon. Horrible. It was heart-wrenching. Again, if you missed the newscast on Friday, June 11th, we took you to Ashkelon, where it was a direct hit on this man's home, and it demolished his house. He's probably in his late 60s, early 70s. He was sleeping in the home with his grandchildren, his wife. Ashkelon's about 8 miles north of Gaza on the Mediterranean coast. And it really bore the brunt of this latest war. I mean, Hamas just bombarded Ashkelon with rockets. It was really horrible, more so than at any time. Ashkelon was targeted. 2014, it was targeted, but not like this. This time it was hundreds upon hundreds of rockets targeting Ashkelon. This house was destroyed. Not only that, to see it up close, a lot of times people say, well, these Hamas rockets, they're kind of firing them haphazardly. They're not precision guided. What's the big deal? I saw firsthand the damage these rockets can do. Not only was his house destroyed, and this poor man, his name was Asher, a woman living with him, a caretaker, she was not an Israeli citizen. She was from India. She was killed by this rocket attack in his home. This man lost everything, lost all of his possessions, nothing left. His caretaker, dear friend, killed. Not only that, to give you an idea of the strength of these supposed little tiny Hamas rockets, this house was destroyed, and the houses around it, the shock waves from the rocket destroyed the roofs all around on the street. There was damage from this one rocket throughout this block, throughout this street in Ashkelon, Israel. So that gives you an idea of the lethality of these rockets. This is no joke. And a lot of people in Ashkelon who I spoke to said it was different this time. 2014, which was the last major war between Hamas and Israel in Gaza, it was bad and Ashkelon was hit, but it was different for two reasons. Number one, Ashkelon was hit more than ever before. And number two, these rockets were different. Several people commented to me and said, these were bigger payloads, more powerful. They did more damage. Clearly, Iran's influence on Hamas, supplying the parts for these rockets first, but secondly, supplying Hamas with the know-how and the technology to build more lethal rockets with bigger payloads. I was stunned to talk to various security experts in Israel last week, to talk to Israel Defense Forces, former generals. And they said, look, in the past 7 years since the 2014 Gaza war, Hamas took a massive leap forward. And Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the other Iranian proxy operating in Gaza, they took a massive leap forward in terms of their capabilities. That was really disturbing to hear, folks. And Hamas now feels very confident. They say, hey, look, we shut down Ben Gurion Airport for a few days. We bombarded Tel Aviv. We reached at points beyond Tel Aviv. We were able to launch 4,300 rockets in only 11 days. They're feeling very good about themselves right now, and they're saying, hey, we've got rockets to spare. So although Israel hit them and hit them hard during that war, this is a persistent thorn in Israel's side. We talked at the top. If you just joined us late here on this live newscast, we're going for about 5 more minutes, but you can check it out in our archives. We have thousands of people with us right now. This is great. God bless you all. Welcome. But at the top, we talked about this terror balloon problem that also is coming from Gaza. So you got the rockets, the missiles, the terror tunnels, the terror balloons. It's a thorn in Israel's side, the Hamas regime in Gaza, and it's backed by Iran, and it's a persistent thorn, and we'll see what the new government does about it. What will the Naftali Bennett-led government, what will their approach be to this Hamas problem in Gaza? And I want to make clear again, we had some controversy recently. Some folks saying we'll only support Israel if Bibi is a leader. As a Christian, that's dead wrong theologically. We support Israel because God tells us to. He doesn't say support Israel, but only if this certain individual is the leader. Hey, supported the Netanyahu administration for sure. I think he was a great prime minister. He'll go down as one of the best. But, we support Israel through thick and thin. And we pray for this new government, that they do a good job and that they provide strong leadership right now. I don't think anyone watching right now, say what you will about Bennett or Netanyahu, I don't think anyone watching right now wants to see an Israeli government do horrible and put Israel in a weak position while the wolves are sniffing around at the door. Israel needs to be strong and stable right now with the various threats it's facing. So we wish the new government luck. Even though we might have liked, obviously, Netanyahu as well, we want to see the new government do well too. Okay, let's see what else we have. Okay, it's a new government. A lot of talk about the third temple. Is a new government interested in building the third temple? I don't think so. I don't think this government is interested in building the third temple, but we do know. And I talked about this when I was overlooking the Temple Mount on our newscast last Tuesday. Again, check it out in our archives. A third temple will be built, without a doubt. The Bible is very clear about that. A temple will be built. When will it be built? We don't know, but the Bible, the book of Revelation says, and Daniel also, the prophet Daniel talks about the temple being built and the Antichrist eventually sitting in that temple. That is clearly going to happen eventually. When? We don't know. Is this new government making noise about doing that? No, not at all. I can tell you that there are certain folks in Israel. I think of the Temple Institute is one where they are preparing, and they have the menorah, they have the utensils that were used in the temples in years past, centuries past. 2,000 years ago was the last time. But there is certainly a movement in Israel that wants to see the third temple built. Without a doubt, that movement is there. And scripturally, we know that a day is coming when it will be rebuilt. Is it happening anytime soon? Who knows? I can tell you this current government has made it wouldn't I would be shocked if it would happen under this current government, because you have such differing ideologies. You have far left, you have an Islamist party in there. So I'd find it very surprising if there was any kind of movement in this government. I don't think so. But circumstances, hey, expect the unexpected is what I'll say in today's Middle East. Circumstances, perhaps outside of this current government's control, could lead to some things. Who knows? But we clearly live in Bible times. The Middle East is, who would have thought 5 years ago that Israel would have peace treaties with the UAE and Bahrain and Sudan and Morocco, and that there would be a real possibility of Israel and Saudi Arabia striking a peace deal. Expect the unexpected in today's Middle East is what I'll say regarding that question. Very, very fascinating times. Clearly, we are in Bible times, prophetic times. Let's see. We have time for maybe one more. Let's see. Hey, I like that comment from Tracy Challenor. The Arch of Titus in Rome is a testament to Israel's connection to the land. Yes, it is. The Arch of Titus depicts the Roman victory. We're talking about the temple, the second temple. The Arch of Titus depicts the second temple, the Roman victory over the people of Israel when they destroyed the second temple. The Arch of Titus is a victory arch in Rome. It shows the Romans carting away the treasures of the temple, including the menorah from the temple. That's proof that, yes, the Jewish people were in the land of Israel 2,000 years ago. We shouldn't even have to prove that. It's common historical knowledge, you would think, but there's a lot of deniers today, to say the least. I think that is it. What do you miss most from your Israel trip? That's the last question. What do I miss most from my Israel trip now that I'm home? I miss my friends in Israel. I miss the spirit of God there and just the closeness I feel to the Creator in His land. I miss the weather. I miss the sights, the smells, the sounds, the tastes, the food. I miss everything. It's my second home. And when I'm not there, I want to be there. I miss my family, of course. So, I want to be with my family and have them there with me. That would be ideal. But I miss everything. I miss the land, the look of the land, the landscape, the beauty. Israel's got everything. It's got snow-capped mountains to the north. It's got oceans, seas, deserts, modern cities, camping, hiking, whatever you want, resorts, water, whatever you want. Israel has it. Hey, we got to go. It's been an hour. That went fast. Wow, guys, it was great. Thank you for everything. This was awesome. God bless all of you. Thanks for joining. We'll be back tomorrow with the newscast. This was great. Doing the live stream with you all. We'll do another one probably in 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks we've been doing the live stream, maybe sooner. But I really enjoy these, getting to know you, getting your questions. Until tomorrow, thanks for joining us. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. See you soon.